Your room smells like old people. May froze. The words weren't whispered in anger or carelessness. They were spoken with casual disgust. Right outside the door of the house she owned but no longer belonged in. Her daughter-in-law's voice cut deeper than any storm, and her son's silence was worse. In that moment, May understood. To them, she wasn't family anymore. She was clutter, something to be managed, hidden, erased. That wound didn't come out of nowhere. It was the breaking point after months of being pushed aside in her own home. And it was the moment May Delaney, 74, decided she would no longer accept invisibility. May Delaney was 74 years old, a retired art teacher who had once filled classrooms with the scent of oils and charcoal dust. Now she lived quietly in the carriage house behind her own Victorian mansion in Savannah, the home she had inherited from her aunt, while her son Ethan and his wife Brianna occupied the grand front house. On a damp morning, with moss dripping from the ancient oaks and a faint trace of lavender drifting from May's tiny garden, her world cracked open. She stood still as Brianna's voice carried clearly from the hallway of the main house, sharp and casual over the phone. Her room smells like old people. I have to spray the hall every day just to cover it up. The words sliced deeper than insult. They branded her as something shameful, something that needed masking. May's breath caught in her chest. For a moment, she waited for Ethan's voice, some sign of loyalty. But when he appeared, all he said was a flat reminder. "Mom, don't hang your robe on the balcony rail. It ruins the look of the historic district." His tone was calm, almost bored, as if her existence was a blemish on the home's facade. May swallowed hard, her silence heavier than any reply. The sting of those few words lingered long after Brianna's call ended, leaving May with the hollow sense that she had been erased in the very house she owned. She turned away from the window and returned to her carriage house, carrying the weight of years of sacrifice for a son who now seemed blind to it all. That night, as the hum of cicadas echoed through the humid air, May sat on her narrow bed with a wooden chest resting across her lap. Inside lay the deed and trust papers, the proof that the mansion was still legally hers. Her hands brushed the worn edges as if drawing strength from the ink and parchment. Opening her laptop, she searched for real estate brokers who specialized in discreet historic property sales. The glow of the screen lit her lined face as her cursor hovered over the words, "Request a discreet valuation." May's fingers hesitated only a moment before pressing down. In that instant, something shifted. She was no longer just enduring. She was preparing to fight back, and this time, she would not be ignored. The afternoon light slanted across the polished floorboards of the main house as May moved slowly through the dining room, dusting and rearranging pieces no one else cared about. When she opened the buffet cabinet to straighten the stacked papers, her hands froze on a thick folder tucked in the back. Sliding it free, she stared at the bold title across the front, Reverse Mortgage Proposal. Her heart tightened as she saw Brianna's neat handwriting scrawled in the margin. Move her into assisted living before fall. Stage the house by October. The words were calculated, cold, and written with the ease of someone drawing up shopping lists. Her chest ached as she carried the file back to the carriage house. Later, with the glow of her laptop spilling across her lap, May logged into the joint account Ethan had insisted on managing for her convenience. The numbers lined up in cruel clarity, month after month. Transfers marked to his LLC, a struggling real estate venture she had known nothing about. Each transaction cut like a reminder that her trust had been casually siphoned away, as if to drive the knife deeper. That same afternoon, Hank Whitaker, her neighbor and an old carpenter, stopped by to return a book. In the easy way of small talk, he mentioned that Brianna had recently asked him what it might cost to strip the original wood moldings for a sleek, open kitchen design. May managed a polite nod, but inside she felt the walls of her world tightening. At dinner, the charade continued. Brianna smiled too sweetly as she ladled stew into May's bowl. "You know, maybe you'd be happier somewhere with more activities, more people your age," she said. Her voice soft as honey but sharp underneath. Ethan said nothing, only shifting in his chair, his silence louder than agreement. May sat perfectly still, spoon untouched, her thoughts finally clear. She was not a cherished mother, not even a respected elder in this house. To them, she was an obstacle standing in the way of their plans. That night, May Delaney understood. Her very presence had become the problem they intended to solve. And she knew she would have to decide, stay silent and be erased, or rise and reclaim what was hers. The Savannah heat clung to the walls that afternoon, thick and heavy, when May stepped into the dining room. The overhead light glared too brightly, bouncing off the polished table where Brianna had spread out a glossy, redecorating plan. Cool grays, stark whites, bold accent colors, the kind of palette that erased history rather than preserved it. Brianna's voice dripped with sugar as she traced the mock-ups. "We were thinking it might be better if you moved upstairs." "Mom, the second floor is brighter, more comfortable. It would make things easier for everyone." Ethan chimed in quickly, his smile tight. "It'll be convenient for us to keep an eye on you, and you'd get more light." The carriage house could finally be put to better use. Their eyes betrayed what their words disguised. The studio Brianna had long hinted at, a business venture ready to swallow May's quiet refuge. For a moment, May said nothing. Her hand trembled only slightly as she reached into her bag and drew out the trust papers. The May Delaney trust that had secured her rights long before Ethan or Brianna moved in. She laid the folder gently on the table, the sound of its weight louder than any raised voice. "This house," she said, her voice steady and deliberate, "still belongs to me." Ethan's cheeks flushed as he stumbled over excuses about bills and landscaping costs, as if itemized expenses could erase ink sealed years ago. Brianna's smile vanished. Her lips pressed into a thin, hard line. The air thickened, every breath strained. The silence louder than the storm that had been building for months. May closed the folder with care, tucking it under her arm. Without another word, she turned and walked back toward the carriage house, her footsteps measured, final, behind her. The dining room hung in a suffocating stillness, the weight of a new battlefield settling over the family. For the first time, Ethan and Brianna were forced to see what they had long ignored. May Delaney was no longer just a quiet presence to be managed. She was a force ready to fight. The morning heat pressed down on Savannah like a wet blanket, the kind of air that clung to the skin and slowed every breath. May sat at the small oak desk in her carriage house, papers spread out before her. Beside her, attorney Tessa Kim flipped carefully through each folder May had brought out from the chest. Then her hand stilled. She slid a stapled packet toward May. "Look at this." May leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she read the header. An application for home renovation, stamped and filed under her name. But her signature, scrawled at the bottom, wasn't hers. It was a forgery. Ethan had submitted plans to tear into the original structure, to rip out the historic moldings and remake the house into something marketable. May's pulse quickened, thudding in her ears as if her body already knew the betrayal ran deeper than family. By late afternoon, the sound of knuckles rapping at the door pulled her from her thoughts. The mailman handed her a thick envelope, sealed with the crimson insignia of the Historic Preservation Society. She broke it open with trembling fingers. The letter inside was clear and merciless. Any unauthorized alteration to the property would bring heavy fines and possible legal action. Her hands shook, but her eyes burned bright as she read the words again. It was undeniable now. Her son and daughter-in-law hadn't just tried to sideline her. They had stepped over the line of the law itself. Tessa's voice cut through the silence, low and steady. "You have the upper hand here, May. This is your property, and they've crossed a boundary they can't explain away. But don't fool yourself, this won't stop them. If anything, they'll push harder." May folded the letter with deliberate care, pressing the crease flat beneath her palm. She drew in a long, steady breath. The weight in her chest had shifted. Fear gave way to resolve. What had begun as whispered insults and casual dismissals was now a battle fought on paper, stamped and notarized. The fight for her dignity had moved into the open, and May knew the war ahead would be public, relentless, and impossible to ignore. Savannah roared that night, thunder rolling over the river like cannon fire. Rain slashing against the slate roof of the old mansion. Inside the damp carriage house, May lit one of her aunt's lavender candles, the small flame flickering bravely against the storm. Its soft glow stretched her shadow long across the wall. But the comfort was short-lived. From the main house, Brianna's sharp voice carried through the hall. "That smell is awful. It stinks up the whole place." The words pierced through the rain, extinguishing the fragile warmth the candle had offered. May swallowed the hurt, steadying herself. When the wind rattled the shutters harder, she called on Hank, her neighbor, to help move the wooden chest of keepsakes to his dry storage shed. Together, they trudged through sheets of rain, their coats soaked, the chest heavy between them. On his porch, they sat a moment, dripping and breathless, watching the storm thrash the street. Hank's voice, rough with memory, broke the silence. He told her of his late wife, who had faded into the fog of Alzheimer's, and then, with quiet conviction, he warned her, "Don't let anyone shrink your life down just because they're afraid of your memories." His words settled deeper than the storm itself. By morning, the rain had eased, leaving the air damp and musty. May returned to her carriage house just in time to face Ethan's calm but cutting declaration. "We're looking into conservatorship, Mom. You're not really capable of making these decisions anymore." His tone was practiced, clinical, as though he were discussing finances, not dismantling his mother's independence. May studied his face, then slowly reached into her bag. With a faint, knowing smile, she placed a folded document on the table, a medical evaluation signed by her longtime physician, confirming her mental capacity beyond question. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. The strike Ethan thought would shatter her resolve dissolved in an instant. The storm outside had passed, but May knew the real battle inside these walls had only just begun. Late afternoon sunlight spilled across Savannah's moss-draped streets as May stepped into the boutique real estate office. The air inside carried the clean scent of polished wood and crisp paper. A world away from the heaviness of her own home. She sat tall in the leather chair, shoulders squared, her hands steady as she signed her name to the contract. With that signature, the mansion would pass into the care of a preservation trust, partnered with a boutique inn. The agreement was ironclad. The historic house would be protected, and May would hold the right to remain in her carriage house for the rest of her life at a symbolic rent. The ink had barely dried when Ethan struck back. By the next morning, he had filed an emergency petition at the county courthouse, accusing his own mother of being manipulated. The hearing came swiftly, the courtroom taut as a drawn bow. Ethan and Brianna sat stiff in their pressed suits, while May, flanked by attorney Tessa Kim, clutched her folder of documents. One by one, Tessa laid the evidence before the judge, the deed and trust naming May as the rightful owner, the medical evaluation certifying her sound judgment, the bank records showing Ethan's quiet siphoning of funds into his failing LLC. Each page landed like a stone, the air in the room heavier with every revelation. The judge's gavel cracked the silence. The petition was denied. More than that, the bench warned Ethan and Brianna in measured tones that financial exploitation of an elder was not only immoral, but criminally actionable. Their arguments collapsed under the weight of May's quiet preparation. May walked out of the courthouse into a warm breeze, the late-day sun brushing her silver hair. She felt lighter than she had in years. That evening, back in her carriage house, she opened the familiar blue cookie tin that had once held her aunt's shortbread. Sliding the signed contract inside, she closed the lid. The faint scent of butter and sugar rose as if blessing her choice. For May, it wasn't just a document. It was proof that her voice still carried, her judgment still mattered, and her life was finally her own again. The once grand mansion echoed with the sharp rhythm of hammers and the scrape of paint being stripped from its walls, every sound marking its transformation into a boutique inn. Dust swirled through the halls, where Brianna's redecorating plans had once sprawled, now discarded and irrelevant. Across the courtyard, May had settled fully into the carriage house, her mornings bathed in a stream of light that danced across the polished oak beams. The scent of the wood was warm, grounding, as though the house itself welcomed her home. Ethan appeared at her door more than once, his face drawn and pale. With forced composure, he returned the money he had siphoned. each repayment a bitter pill he could hardly swallow. Brianna followed, her apology stiff and brittle, a hollow echo of remorse. Her eyes betrayed her longing for the dream that had crumbled in her hands. May listened without answering, her silence sharper than any rebuke. Instead, she turned her focus to something lasting. At her small kitchen table, she drafted a new list in neat, deliberate script. The Ava Delaney Art Scholarship Fund. The account would be secured directly with the bank, insulated from Ethan's reach, ensuring her granddaughter's future without compromise. It was not revenge, but a declaration that her legacy would serve love and not greed. That evening, the family gathered for dinner, the air thick with unspoken tension. Forks scraped lightly against plates until May set her chopsticks down with quiet finality. She lifted her gaze, steady and calm, and spoke. "From now on, if you come to me, it will be with respect, not with plans or numbers." The room fell into silence, heavy and unyielding. Ethan looked down at his hands. Brianna's mouth pressed into a thin line. For the first time in years, May felt the balance shift entirely. No longer the dependent figure they sought to manage. She had become the one who defined the rules. The authority that had once been chipped away now returned to her, firm as the oak beams above her head. Spring settled gently over Savannah, wrapping the city in a warmth that softened even the hardest corners of its cobblestone streets. The carriage house glowed in the afternoon light, every window flung open to invite in the drifting scent of mossy oaks and damp earth. Inside, May prepared for her weekend watercolor class. She had arranged jars of brushes on the wide oak table, palettes lined with jewel-toned paints, and sheets of heavy paper waiting for eager hands. As the students filed in, travelers drawn by the charm of the boutique inn, the room filled with chatter, the kind of energy that made the old walls hum with life. May stood at the front, her brush moving in a fluid sweep, coaxing the outline of a wrought iron balcony onto the page. Outside, the street bustled, the historic facades of Bull Street alive with color and history. "Don't be afraid of the water," she told her students, dipping her brush deep into a wash of blue. "Let it move, let it tell the story for you." The class leaned in, captivated by the calm authority in her voice, the way she carried herself as though each stroke was an act of reclaiming space in the world. Ava arrived halfway through, cheeks flushed with excitement, carrying a box of freshly printed recipe booklets. Together, she and May set them by the door, a small collection of family recipes. Most beloved among them the shortbread cookies that had flavored May's childhood. The plan was simple: sell them to the inn's guests, and send the proceeds directly to the new Art Scholarship Fund. As Ava explained the project to curious visitors, May felt her chest swell with a pride unburdened by fear. Later, as the class wound down, May lingered by the open doorway, watching the golden light spill across the courtyard. Ethan appeared with Ava's school bag in hand, his usual confidence replaced by an awkward quiet. He offered a hesitant thank you, words clumsy but genuine. May met his eyes, searching for the boy she had once raised, and nodded with a gentleness that left the moment uncluttered, free of accusation. And then Hank arrived, steady as always, a small kumquat tree cradled in his weathered arms. He placed it just beside the door, the tiny fruits glowing orange against their dark leaves. The fragrance of citrus rose into the air, blending with the buttery scent of cookies cooling on the counter and the faint musk of polished oak beams. Students laughed inside as they shared their finished sketches, their joy spilling into the twilight. May breathed deeply, filling her lungs with the mingled scents of citrus, wood, and flower. For the first time in years, there was no bitterness clinging to the air. No masks, no attempts to cover her existence. Only freedom, dignity, and the unexpected sweetness of new beginnings. In that fragrant spring evening on Bull Street, May knew she had stepped fully into a life of her own making, and the world felt entirely hers again.